A Nintendo of America employee named James Wong, he's actually a manager at the company, has described people opposed to the evil ideology of wokeness as, quote, angry bigots. Furthermore, Wong has also encouraged racism against white people in the form of, quote, anti racist ideology. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com last night. And James Wong is a content production systems manager at Nintendo of America. And he made comments describing people who are opposed, gamers who are opposed to wokeness in video games as angry bigots. It came in the wake of ex-user Esco Cochise posting this. So if it ain't DEI and corporate BS, why do modern games suck complete cheeks compared to the past? Are you defending the state of the industry? To ex-user Airbagged responded, 2024 is effing stacked with amazing games, and Dawn Trail isn't out yet. Oh, and Shadow of the Erdtree isn't out yet. Oh, and Astrobot isn't out yet. And told the person to shut up. Obviously didn't address his question whatsoever. Just pointing to a bunch of games that he thinks are going to be good, or DLCs that I guess are going to be good. And Wong replied to this post from Airbagged, writing this: it feels like all these angry bigots were better people before their con idols gave them terms they should get mad about, when those terms are concepts that have been around forever. You mean this thing I like from 2000 is woke? Always has been. So there you go, describing people opposed to the DEI corporate agenda that Esco Cochise is talking about are angry bigots. Very clear who he's talking about there. Unsurprisingly, Wong is an adherent of identity politics and attempts to weaponize language to push the ideology. Back in December 2020, he wrote this: am I the only one who's had a problem with the term PC master race? Because it feels like something a white person would say to make others feel inferior. Much in the same way the computer terms master and slave don't live completely rent-free in my head. I know, weird. So there you go, clearly trying to push liberal ideology through the language, not liking the terms master and slave, and trying to apply racism to them when it has nothing to do with that. And a follow-up out of this, it's more of a something socioeconomic superiority complex thing going on, a flex on having more money and accessibility than others, then implying that others won't, can't, or shouldn't. I'm well aware that there's this too. He then linked to the Wikipedia entry for master race. And then in January 2021, he wrote this in reply to a post from Elijah Schaefer sharing video of writers on January 6th. He says, I wrote this in a reply to this solo retweet, but I'll say it here for posterity. These are fellow Americans who don't want human beings like me to exist. They may not say it, but the true intent lies within. They don't care about anything else and can't see that they're the sheep. I don't think that has anything to do with him or race or anything like that. But go on there, James. Just obviously, he seems like a massive narcissist trying to make everything about him, when I don't think it has anything to do with him at all. He then listed examples that he claims he was subjected to racism prejudice. So immediately following this post, he went on to list all of these examples where he claims that he was subjected to racism and prejudice. This is the first one. He says, moments that I can recall, the strongest where I've experienced racism prejudice: Rest Stop Diner between San Francisco and Los Angeles. A trucker cap wearing white man looked at me when I emerged from the restroom, sitting down with coffee mug in hand. He looked at me and just shook his head. Somehow that was racism or prejudice. Who knows why the guy was shaking his head? Didn't ask him, don't know. It's all in James's own head here that he thinks he was experiencing racism. Maybe the guy was just thinking something in his mind and he was just like, geez, that's awful. Who knows? Lots of different possible reasons for that. Just looks like, again, trying to play the victim, being a narcissist. He then posted this: on my move from California to Washington while driving through Oregon, I simply drove passed a truck with a banner that said diversity is a code word for white genocide. It set a tone for the rest of the day, and I was uncomfortable when I ate lunch alone in a small town subway. I don't really understand why you would be offended by that, because it literally is what people who push diversity indeed believe. We will get to that. He then questioned, what are their motivations? From my perspective, racial superiority, control, and greed. These folks are all about us versus them. In short, it's like they don't want people of color to exist. That's my take. Sad. We'll get to this as well. This is clear projection. This is exactly what actual woke cultists believe. Bishop Robert Barron has a very good breakdown on this, which I've discussed in many previous videos, but he does a good job on it. It's usually always the woke cultists who have the us versus them mentality, and they try to use it to gain power. Some more perspective, it's these same people who don't care about someone like me, but also younger children, youth, older people. They attack the meek with words and physical harm. It's so cold-blooded. I have to tell my parents in their late 70s to be safe. It is horrific. Remember, the things that he's experienced is literally a guy holding a coffee cup, shaking his head, and then a truck with a poster saying diversity is a code word for white genocide. He would actually bring up this story about the truck in November 2020. He had previously brought it up. He wrote this, a thread 5 years ago when I was driving from California to Washington after getting the job. I assume that's for Nintendo. I drove through Oregon. I don't remember if it happened here or after I stayed with my friend and his family in Beaverton, but I was approaching a pickup truck on the highway. It was a pickup truck with a trailer with bales of hay. The hay was covered by vinyl signs on each side. As I approached the rear of, then was beside the trailer, I was able to read the sign. Diversity is a code word for white genocide. It had a URL and a hashtag. Now I can vividly remember feeling provoked, but I wasn't angry. I drove past this truck afraid. I felt uncomfortable, as if suddenly every other car on the highway was driven by a white person, and I felt afraid, like all eyes were on me. Again, this guy is like living in his mind. He's a mind slave to himself. Fear, that's what I remember. I remember driving into a small town to eat at a Subway because there wasn't going to be any food for much further into the drive, and that I needed to eat my food fast, play it cool, and then leave because everyone in there was white. I mean, this guy is literally, I think, a racist. He thinks white people are going to somehow commit violence against him, which is utterly ridiculous. All because he says he saw a sign that said, diversity is a code word for white genocide, which implies that it's people that are pushing diversity are trying to literally kill white people. And he has now interpreted this as white people are going to be violent against him. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Again, just utterly nonsensical. Nevertheless, he continued and said, I wasn't sure if other patrons were looking at me while I ate. I was on alert for no good reason, except that I didn't want to be provoked by anything or called out by anyone. The remainder of the trip was beautiful. I remember driving over a bridge that led me into the mountains into Washington State. The nature I saw on that drive was breathtaking and incredible, and allowed me to forget about what had happened as I drove by that truck. He then called for racism against whites. I still think about that drive once in a while with the discourse of racism, anti-racism, etc. I remind myself of how I felt at that time. I think it's a reminder that we all really need to be anti-racist. We need to call people out when they make that simple joke. So remember, this is the guy who said he was the one feeling uncomfortable when he was eating at a Subway with a bunch of white people. In my opinion, he's the one who's being racist against white people. And then he literally admits to it and calls for other people to be racist as well. You literally can't make it up. So again, what is the 3 rules of the SJW? Lie, double down a lie, and project. So he's literally lying about these people being racist towards him, so allegedly being racist towards him. He's doubled down on it multiple times, and it's actually he's the one who is the real racist. And as I said, we get to this. Diversity is indeed code for white genocide. Article written by Emily Goldstein in Thought Catalog in 2015 is literally titled, Yes, Diversity is about getting rid of white people. And that's a good thing. This is what she wrote in the article. One of the more common memes that I've seen white supremacists spread around recently has been diversity is a code word for white genocide. The concept here is that diversity is only promoted in white nations, and that the end goal is to eliminate white people altogether by flooding all white countries with non-white people until there are no white people left. Well, guess what, white supremacists? That's exactly right. Diversity is about getting rid of white people, and that's a good thing. That's what Emily Goldstein wrote in the article. She even concludes the article writing this. So, yes, white supremacists, diversity is indeed white genocide. And white genocide is exactly what the world needs more than anything else. So that's literally what these people are saying. And we also have author Ibram X. Kendi. He literally wrote a book titled How to Be an Anti-Racist. And then and it reveals that it's to be racist, because this is what he writes in his book. The defining question is whether the discrimination is creating equity or inequity. If discrimination is creating equity, then it is anti-racist. If discrimination is creating inequity, then it is racist. Someone reproducing inequity through permanently assisting an overrepresented racial group into wealth and power is entirely different than someone challenging that inequity by temporarily assisting an underrepresented racial group into relative wealth and power until equity is reached. He is clearly endorsing discrimination based on one's skin color. And that is exactly what Wong is telling people to do against white people. You have to be anti-racist. What does that mean? It means racist against white people. From the guy who literally wrote the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. So I didn't include the Bishop Barron stuff in here, but let me see if I can find that. Here it is. He said this to Angelus News, and he talked about why woke ideology should be opposed. And he goes on to explain what it is. He says, first, they advocate a deeply antagonistic social theory whereby the world is divided sharply into the two classes of oppressors and oppressed. We clearly see that through James Wong's numerous posts on X there. Second, they relativize moral value and see classic morality as an attempt by the ruling class to maintain itself in power. Third, they focus not so much on the individual as on racial and ethnic categories, and hence they endorse the idea of collective guilt and recommend a sort of reverse discrimination to address the injustices of the past. Clearly see that in the advocation of quote-unquote anti-racism by James Wong. Fourth, they tend to demonize the market economy and the institutions of democracy as part of a superstructure defending the privileged. Fifth, they push toward equity of outcome throughout the society rather than equality of opportunity. That is literally the definition of anti-racism as given by Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote the book How to Be an Anti-Racist. And then Bishop Barron also adds this. And finally, wokeism employs divisive and aggressive strategies of accusation that are contrary to the gospel demand to love our enemies. That's exactly what James Wong does to this guy in the restaurant who is just drinking his coffee. He's accusing him of racism for drinking a coffee and shaking his head. And then obviously he's also accusing this person of basically calling out the evil that woke ideology is pushing by trying to erase white people through quote unquote anti-racism and diversity initiatives. And saying that this guy was racist and all of these white people were racist in this like small little subway on the border between Oregon and Washington. And that's exactly what James Wong did. And Bishop Barron says, suffice to say that Catholic social teaching stands athwart all of this. And indeed it does. It wants social justice, of course, but not on woke terms. Its heroes are not Marx, Nietzsche, and Foucault, but rather Isaiah, Amos, Jeremiah, Jesus the Lord, Ambrose, Aquinas, and Teresa of Calcutta. So I think Bishop Barron does a really good takedown of this woke ideology that James Wong was clearly pushing. I find it absolutely reprehensible that this guy is a manager at Nintendo of America. He's clearly pushing this stuff in Nintendo. We've seen this. I've documented this on their job description. They're translators. They're all about the DEI and woke ideology. They are sponsoring disgusting social movements in Seattle Pride, where old men on bicycles expose themselves to young children in the street just last year during the same event. So clearly, Nintendo of America definitely pushes this ideology through a corporate culture, and it's not surprising that they employ people like James Wong. It's absolutely wrong. It's sickening. We must say no to this, and we must work to change the culture of Nintendo of America. We must say no to this degeneracy that is permeating it. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.